Welcome back to the channel, folks. This week I just wanted to share with you my journey on selecting canoe paddles. Now, I've had 4 paddles so far over about a 1.5 to 2 year period that I've been using, and I think I've come up with what I believe is the right combination for me and for what I do with a canoe paddle. I do a lot of canoeing. I'm out every second weekend, which is 26 weekends in a year, and a lot more than that typically, because I'll then do day trips in between, long weekends, that type of stuff. So I'm covering some pretty long distances. On those weekends away, I'm covering anywhere between 40 to 60 kilometers in a weekend. Whether pedaling out to camp, return to camp, and then obviously the exploration and fishing whilst I'm out camping, etc. So I'm doing some pretty extensive kilometers. And what that's allowed to me to do is to work through what works for me and my thoughts on canoe paddle selection and the combination that I've ended up with, and that's just what I want to share with you today. So what I want to cover off today is what I believe are the 4 key areas. One is obviously the design of the actual paddle itself, the weight of the paddle, and that becomes important when you're starting to do full days of paddling, etc. over long distances. The weight becomes very, very important. What I call in the water performance, not on the water, but in the water performance. And then the robustness of the paddle itself as well. There is a trade-off between design and robustness and the ability to finesse that paddle in the water. And as I'll go through the different paddles, I'll show the different robustness levels, design levels, and how I've ended up with the 2 that I've got now. So the first paddle I want to share with you is this beaver tail I purchased when I purchased the actual canoe. Now you can see the handle snapped off this, and I'll put a link in the description below of the video in which that happened. But this is a beaver tail style of paddle. You can see the nice soft shoulders at the top here, beautiful rounded bottom design. Quite a strong and robust little paddle. This one is covered in fiberglass, so it is waterproof, which makes the end of it very, very tough. So if you're doing only a small amount of paddling, or not as much paddling as I'm doing, this works particularly well because it's good in shallow water and it's good in deep water. The shoulders allow you to get it nice and close to the side of the actual canoe itself. And with the fiberglass, you can still use this in rocks, rapids and so forth, and from pushing yourself off the bank, and you're not going to damage the actual paddle itself too much. As you can see, this one still lasted quite well. It's quite good condition, but unfortunately, as you can see, there's a very clean snap there where the actual fault in the timber unfortunately gave way 22 kilometers away from my car. So on that particular trip, I then had to stitch this guy back up again with some tape and some rope, etc., and then use that to paddle back. Some of the other advantage of this particular paddle, this is what I call both a traditional and contemporary design in it. The actual design of it, as I said, is a beaver tail, but the handle and the grip on this thing is actually a hollow fiberglass handle, which helps with the weight distribution, and a solid resin tip. So this makes it quite a comfortable paddle to use over a distance. It is, however, quite heavy, and that balance of the large, heavier blade does tend to make it a little bit unbalanced. So I was very, very happy with this paddle, I'd admit. I had no ideas or thoughts of changing the actual paddle itself, and it wasn't until it broke that then brought me around to the idea of, okay, well then first of all I need to have 2 paddles, but also I need to now look at the designs of paddles, what is going to work for me and what's not going to work for me. So after breaking that paddle, I went back to Dan at One Tree Canoe, and he was good enough to provide me with a different design of paddle to try. Now this one is a Voyageur design. So as you can see, it's quite square through the shoulders here and has quite a large blade. So this is the same design as the previous one in it. It's a laminated timber, fiberglass over the top, hollow handle and a solid resin tip. The advantages of this one is it moves masses of water. This one will get you up jet skiing across the top of the water in a canoe. Because of the large surface area, it will really dig in and can get you moving very, very quickly. And from a rudder point of view, with a big blade, it's also quite good as well. What I found disadvantage-wise, though, unfortunately, was over the period of 8 months that I had it, I started to develop shoulder injuries up in here, paddler's shoulders, on both sides. So on the outside of the shoulders there, I started to get really tweaky there, and I thought, what's going on here? Did some research, and sure enough, you can get sore shoulders from the wrong design of paddle. And the reason being is when you're pulling hard on this thing, it puts a lot of force on your shoulders. Now, if you're young, 18, 22 years old, probably not an issue. Similarly, if you're not doing big kilometers or paddling as much as I do, then maybe this is just fine as well. The other disadvantage I found with this, of course, is that the square shoulder here doesn't allow you to get close to the side of the canoe. So you do tend to paddle out a bit further from the side of the canoe. Once again, that puts more pressure on your shoulders and your back because you're now reaching out further from the canoe to actually paddle, etc. But it has done me quite well and has worked exceptionally well from the point of view of being robust. The tip has been given a hiding and so forth. It's starting to deteriorate a little bit now. But I'll keep this particular paddle because it is quite good. But it does have some limitations, and one of those is what I call the in-water performance. Whilst it's good as a rudder, its ability for finesse in the water isn't quite as good. Well, of course, when you do break a paddle and you're 22 kilometres from home, it gives you plenty of time to think about, well, I probably do need a spare paddle. Now this one is probably the cheapest option I could find, 10 Australian dollars at a sports store. A little plastic, an aluminium handle, plastic handle on the top as well. And it is a fantastic little paddle. A couple of advantages of this one: super light, weighs absolutely nothing. Quite strong, you've got aluminium going right down into here. Hard, nice thick plastic. It is directional, i.e. it curves that way. So you can only use it one way. And it's very easy to pick up and flick around in your canoe. Now where this has become valuable to me is pushing off on rocks, going through rapids and so forth. You can jam this into rocks, you can smash it against the bank, you can push off in sand and mud and so forth. It's just not going to get it destroyed. It's holding up exceptionally well. So this as a spare paddle for me works absolutely brilliantly. Cannot fault it for the $10, as I said. Its ability to finesse in the water and direct the canoe, it's pretty poor. It does the job, but not exceptionally well. So you end up paddling more than you do actually using it as a rudder. But it works. It's fine. It'll get you through a short pull to a next rapid, short pull to a rapid, just fine. So this has become a mainstay in my canoe. I never go anywhere without this in the canoe. As you can imagine, only being a short little guy, it easily tucks up underneath the front or the back and out of the way. And it's absolutely brilliant. You'll also see in my videos now that whenever I'm taking off from the bank, either leaving or turning, etc., I always use this because there's always rocks, mud, gravel, sand, and whatever it might be. And rather than using my final paddle I'll show you in a moment, I use this little guy. Because it doesn't matter if this one gets damaged, it's only $10, and I'm happy for this one to be able to get smashed against rocks and abused as I take off. And then once I get into deep water, a metre or so deeper, I'll then switch across to the other paddle, and that then gets me going down to wherever I need to get to go. So my final paddle, and the one I enjoy using the most, is this a Ottertail from Grey Owl Paddle Company in Canada. And this thing is an absolute work of art. These things are beautiful. It's made out of cherry wood, which is a hardwood. As you can see, it's quite tall compared to the other paddles. Much longer, narrower blade, and also a very, very thin blade. It has a raw finish, which is then finished with linseed oil. So when I purchased it, I put it out in the sun and I gave it 3 coats of linseed oil over a period of weeks. And if I go in salt water, I'll then wash it down with a little bit of soap and water, dry it, rinse it with fresh water, sorry, then dry it, and then I'll re-oil it again. But this is absolutely beautiful to use in a canoe. The handle and the timber, once it's wet, the oil helps to make it just a little bit grippy in the water. Super light, beautifully balanced. And its ability to finesse, which is what I've realised using this paddle now, and I didn't realise it when I was using the other paddles, its ability to finesse in the water and to direct the canoe is just beautiful to use. You can use this guy all day without any fatigue. I'll put a link in the video below of a guy that works now with Swift Canoes out of Canada, providing paddles to them, and he discusses how this type of paddle, the Ottertail paddle, is much easier on your shoulders. And he also had shoulder injuries. But what he discovered is going to this design, this longer, thinner, extended design, you still have plenty of surface area, but it is much easier on the shoulders. Now I've been to a physio and got my shoulders sorted, and I've been using this ever since, and not an issue at all. Absolutely beautiful. Changed my stroke slightly, but also just using this, and I've really, really enjoyed this canoe paddle. It is, however, very delicate, very, very thin blade. The end of the blade here, you cannot push that into rocks and so forth, it'll just get destroyed. Now that's already roughed up a little bit, just going into a little bit of mud here or there, and it needs an oil at the moment, I must admit, but this is not something you can use in rapids, that I advise anyway. You can, but the chance of snapping that, cracking that tip off, is pretty high. This is not something you push up from the bank from, try and get yourself along over gravel and rocks, etc. Drive it off rocks, drive it off banks. That's not what this is designed for. And that's when I'll pull out this little guy to do that exact job. So I now have 2 paddles that I take everywhere with me. But this one, by far, is the most enjoyable paddle I've had to use. I really dislike the design, as I said, and its in-water performance is probably what's impressed me the most. As I said, you don't realise the design that goes into these things when you're actually trying to move it through the water, just slightly change directions and the pitch of the boat, etc. And its ability to then pull it out and paddle again, it just becomes an absolute delight to use. It's similar to the fishing rod I purchased 12 months ago. You move up to newer technologies and so forth, and it just becomes very, very enjoyable. So they're the paddles I've used. They're all got their own uses, and they're all designs that do work for a lot of people. But for what I do, big kilometres and so forth, lots of travel, I found this 2 paddle policy for me works exceptionally well. So look, that's my thoughts on canoe paddle selection. As I said, I'm very happy with what I use. Really interested in people's comments on this. I put up a video almost a year ago now on why I chose a smaller canoe, and that video has gone exceptionally well. But more importantly to me is I've had lots of comments, a lot of people putting in their thoughts on what canoes they choose, why they choose them, where they use them, etc. So this becomes a really great resource for anyone looking at canoes and so forth. And I want to do the same with paddles. If you've got your own design of paddle, if you've got your own preferred design of paddle, of course, that's what I want to hear about. What do you do with it first of all? What sort of distances are you covering? What sort of water are you in? Is it rivers, moving rivers, rapids, lakes, estuaries, that type of stuff? The ocean? And then your preference as well. There's obviously the other option of a double end paddle, which doesn't work for me, but people like that as well. So leave a comment down below with your thoughts on that. Would love to hear. And obviously other viewers would love to hear your thoughts on what you believe is a good paddle as well. So I'll wrap it up for now. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I put out videos every 2 weeks of my little adventures and so forth I do on my little canoe, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. And I look forward to seeing you out in the water in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.